Good morning, everyone. How to get the old Snapchat back? How to delete Instagram? You're really gonna like this one. How to delete Facebook? These were the top 3 Googled questions last year of 2018. What did not make the list was how do we solve the world's biggest problem? Climate change. How do we fix it? How do we mitigate it? And how do we stop it from happening? Although climate change have become a buzzword, talked about everywhere, but do we really understand what climate change means? Now, the literal meaning of climate change is the shift in global weather patterns. Honestly, that does not sound particularly frightening. Real understanding of climate change means looking at its multiple faces, and there are many. Let's take a few examples. Example number 1, Jakarta, Indonesia's capital city. Indonesia's capital city, if we look at what climate change has in store for it, it's a bit shocking. Only in 3 decades, a city home to 10 million people could be completely submerged underwater, gone as though it never existed. If we don't do anything about stopping climate change, Jakarta could sink for 15 centimeters every year. This is the climate change phase of sinking cities. Second example, drought. Every day, drought forces 300 Hondurans out of their homes to flee as climate refugees. Drought has left their grounds so dry that their crops are failing. The soil has failed its people. These people are not leaving out of choice. They are escaping. This is the climate change phase of creating climate refugees and separating families. Third phase of climate change, pollution. Quarter of India's population doesn't have power, regular power, for basic activities like cooking, lighting, medical treatment, or studying. This urges Indians to consume emitting and polluting fuels, which led to making India the 9th most polluted country in the world, with 1.2 million people dying every year as a result of pollution. This is equivalent of a quarter of Finland's population, and this is the face of pollution. While these are staggering statistics and very ugly faces of climate change, what is the reason that we are passive about it? And these are well-ignored facts. What does that mean about us, that we Google more Snapchat than think about what to do about these issues? Does that mean that we don't care? The answer is no. I don't think so. But what can be the reason that we are so passive about it, that climate change is progressing and we're not stopping it? Here are 3 reasons that we are passive about climate change. Reason number 1 is that climate change does not have one clear face. Take terrorism attack, for example. Terrorism attack has a well-defined, clear face. It has a target and it has an enemy. As such, we in the West have acclimatized and taken measures to communicate with our surroundings in ways that we know how to design for combating threats like terrorism, right? With the way we design our streets today, with the way we design airports, with the way we design entrance to malls. And yes, when we see pictures like this, they don't provoke the human mind in the same way that pictures like this do. Second reason why we are passive about climate change is that climate change is slow. A terrorist attack will take lives very quickly, in seconds. It has a very immediate impact, and it's often unforgettable. An attack that will happen in Paris will trigger a lot of sympathy from all around the world. Even if they are not in Paris, they will stand in solidarity and feel horrified. They will feel that this is an attack on humanity, and they could be subjected to the same threat next. For the majority of people, images of melting ice in the North Pole will simply not trigger the same impact and the same effect globally. This is because we feel that climate change is far, and our generation, the Snapchat generation, may not fully experience the most detrimental consequences of climate change because of its slow pace. As a result, we don't feel the immediate urge to react to the threat. Lastly, people do recognize that there is a big problem, climate change, and that it is actually one of the most and biggest problems that humanity has ever faced. But they feel too small to react to the threat. And if we think about it, this does make sense. One person would feel very small to be able to solve the world's biggest problem. You and I taking shorter showers might not be enough, but it would be a step in the right direction because of the multiples impact. The multiple effect means that one small action, if it's multiplied by many, many people, it could drive a significant measurable result. The question here is, how can we, as the architects of tomorrow, stop climate change from destroying our planet by making small yet effective behavioral changes that can be multiplied by millions and billions and then have an enormous global impact, and only then change climate change? Here are 3 ways that I would like to share with you. First, behavior and consumption adjustments. This is a graphic showing all the nations which make up the European Union, including the Brexiteers. The Worldwide Fund for Nature estimated that 1.5 the area of the European Union could be saved if we limited our food consumption, our meat consumption, to only the nutritional recommended levels that we need. It is because we have access to food. We can overeat and waste food. We do that. It's not because we need. So what can you do about this? Well, if you just had 1 less burger per week, that would be an equivalent of taking your car off the road for 320 miles. And if you were to skip steak with your family, that would be an equivalent of taking your car off the road for 3 months. And if the entire United States, be it excluding the Trump administration, skipped steak and meat and cheese for only 1 day a week, that would be an equivalent to taking 7.6 million cars off the road. See, this is the multiple effect. This is how one person with a small action, if it gets multiplied, it can make a measurable effect that is significant. Secondly, peer influence. Who here has that friend who always convinces them to go on that night out, Even if they know they have an important meeting the next day or an interview. Raise your hand. Or that friend who persuades you to have that extra beer, even when you know you really shouldn't. Raise your hand. If you don't have that friend, you are probably that friend. You don't need to raise your hand for that. The point here is that friends are influencers. They listen to each other. Now, I am not telling you to go crazy and force your friends to become vegan. Absolutely not. This is not the point. The point is that if you try to become vegetarian for only 1 day a week and you like it, share your experience with your friends. Tell them. And if your friends like that and try it and they like it too, they would share it with their friends. And this is how we could create a network effect. That's how we all joined Facebook and Instagram. Until that network grow to a place where we have significant amount of people who won't eat meat and become vegetarian for 1 day a week. And thirdly, government influence. Moving the influence up, we must push our governments to play a bigger role in the fight against climate change. Currently, no government would prioritize environmental issues over economic growth. But for example, government played an essential role in stabilizing economies and reversing crises during the financial crisis. They poured a huge amount of money that helped stabilize economies. Why don't we urge our representative to do something similar as we are approaching environmental crisis? If it takes signing petitions, going to rallies, or even not sending your kids to schools for an afternoon and taking them to demonstrations instead, do it. Because it is their generation that will suffer the consequences of our inaction. But today, we can make choices that can be multiplied into millions and billions, have a global, enormous effect, and reverse crisis. I'd like here to start from myself and give you an example about how I thought small actions could materialize to important impact. So I am a scientist who turned into an entrepreneur because of my deep belief that whatever knowledge I acquired during my PhD and the research that I've done, if I could multiply that into impact that reaches people, then there will be a big win for me and for others. So during my PhD, I worked on a research around the smallest molecule in the world, hydrogen. So hydrogen is an energy carrier. It is a clean molecule. It doesn't have carbon in the first place, so when you burn it, it produces energy, and it doesn't release any carbon. Clean power. So the company that I started utilizes the smallest molecule in the world to create energy that at affordable prices, that is reliable, and that we could supply that and provide it as a solution to address energy poverty that 1.2 billion people around the world suffer from. And here is an example of how the smallest molecule in the world could potentially solve the biggest problem in the world. At the beginning of my talk, I mentioned that one of the reasons that we don't do much about climate change is that we feel too small to make an impact on such a big problem. But I'd like to leave you with a challenge. What is the small action that you will take in whatever capacity you can that can trigger the multiple effect, that could grow and multiply to make significant impact, so we all together could change climate change? Thank you.